Hey, ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? This is Elijah. Welcome to the channel, Glenz's How I See It. Another interview with a dad, special guest today that goes to our church, or goes to my church. He was recommended by Felix Cervantes. Me and him have had encounters and talking about just the gospel at different times of, our relationships. I don't even know how many years it's been, but I know it's at least been 6 years, if not longer. And he's a counselor, and he'll tell you a little bit more about himself. And I want to appreciate him for taking the time out to give us some information about being a dad. All right. How's it going, AJ?
Hey, Elijah, it's going well tonight. Been a long day, but I'm doing well. Still kicking.
Hey, you are, especially if you take a moment at 9:22 to talk to me. I definitely appreciate that.
My pleasure. Yeah.
For sure. So, first question, I always let the guests tell us a little bit about themselves. So, how would you describe yourself?
Well, been married 35 years to the same woman, and that's I say it that way because many people have been married long, but not to the same person, same spouse. We've raised 3 children, still are. I mean, they're adults. 2 of them are married, and one is finishing college. And let's see, professionally, I'm in my second career. Several years ago, about 6 years ago, I believe God was calling me out of the business world to be a marriage and family counselor and therapist. And so that's what I do now. So I literally quit my job one day, and God provided funds and the means to go back to school to get a master's after 3 decades of not being in college. So all the learning was different, but I endured. I would say another thing about me is I'm a lifelong learner of marriage and fathering. I've read a lot about that. So I use a lot of that in my counseling. I see a lot of those issues, let's call them daddy issues, that come up in counseling.
Yeah.
I'm also at church. I work with the youth. I work with the young guys. This year they're seniors. Working with the youth since probably, I think, 06 or 07.
Oh, wow. 14 years.
Yeah. And then this year I had the honor of being the deacon chair for our guys at our church and working alongside the pastor and staff. And so it's been good. This has been my most challenging year.
Okay.
In life. Lost some very dear people to me.
Oh, man.
But also took on new roles, new challenges. But it's been a really good year in spite of all that.
Wow.
And, I like to tell people this, that I believe in our lives, everybody, men and women, you're being prepared for something, and God is preparing you and preparing the way. And then when you get there, he equips you, and you have to make the decision if you're going to step up and do those things he calls you. And if you don't, well, he'll have to choose someone else. And then, as my friends that we've been meeting for about 25 years, once a month, we say, you have to go around the mountain again to learn the lesson. And we say, you know what? We don't have many years left. We better just step up and do it.
Oh, wow. That's a good one, man. I like that you said that we had, you said you had challenges, but it was still a good year.
Yeah. Yeah.
People don't look at challenges as an opportunity to experience greatness.
Yeah.
So how would you describe like the difference between a dad and a father? Since you have more information than anybody that has been on this platform thus far.
Well, I'm fortunate in that, and I'll answer that question this way. I'm fortunate in that I had a dad. He just passed away this year, but he was involved in my life. Learned a whole lot from him. He was really a great dad. Just really great. And his father, my grandfather, had a big impact on my life too.
Oh, wow.
And then, from that grandfather, there were 3 other sons and a daughter. So there were those guys, those people just impacted my life. So father, grandfather, uncles impacted. My father at times would coach the baseball team I was on. And if not, my uncle, his next brother, would coach our our team, and he had a son who also passed away this year. We played baseball together, and
Mm.
so there was a lot of good role model examples of how to be a father. And then, I've read extensively about fatherhood from authors like Steve Farrar, and there's also Edwin Lewis Cole and other writers out there that are, if guys aren't reading, they need to be reading about that, especially if they didn't have a good father. But to answer your question, I think today those words are used interchangeably, father and
Yes.
dad. Typically,
Yes.
we would say father is the one who gives birth and dad is the one who's there all along. But if you look at the scripture, our Father, which art in heaven, our Father signifies a caring person, somebody who's there for us. So that's what I'd say. Really, Father, people are looking for who's the one that's in my life. I like what
Mm.
the name escapes me right now, but in one of the books that Dr. Cole writes, there's a preface by a guy, and he says this: that being male is a matter of birth, but being a man is a matter of choice.
Okay.
So if you're going to be a man, then you can be a father or a parent to one, not just giving birth.
That's
Yeah,
good. That's
yeah.
good. I like that. So you was go ahead. You was going to say something?
Well, no. So I think that would be the distinction that today I hear so many people use those words interchangeably, but I think really what people mean is that father is just the person who donates the sperm, and then the
Yeah.
daddy is the one who's there all the time.
That's what's
But
been said thus far on when I've asked on this channel, or if I've asked, on like a Facebook post. That's really kind of where it leans towards. Yeah. I
yeah,
think people are trying to their ultimate thing is to say, okay, the person that takes care of me, no matter the name, is the one that's most influential.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know. So you were talking about your dad earlier. Condolences to him, to you and the fam.
yeah.
Can you kind of walk us back through like what made him a good dad for you, good father
Yeah.
for you?
He was a caring dad. He was a discipliner, obviously provider. And, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And so that was more of a traditional family role back then. Dad worked and mom typically was at home. Um, so they had very traditional gender roles in the home.
Okay.
And when my mother passed away at 19, I saw my dad remarried. I saw him take on a little different role, but still caring, loving, being present, very decisive. He had this knack of saying no. And I wish I could say I was just equally as good. I don't think I am or was, but he just had this ability to say no with the right tone and the right manner, depending on the situation, because he knew what the outcome would be. Generally, he was a school teacher, really then an administrator. He was a principal, assistant principal, so he had contact with so many students. And he used to say, when one family comes through my school, I can generally tell you what the siblings are going to be like based on the older sibling, because it's a family deal there. It's a family effect, family of origin.
Wow.
And so, Dad, he, we were in church, and it was back in the day where you went on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and
I know what you
Wednesday
mean.
evening. Yeah, because we had no activities on Wednesday.
Right.
But we were there, and he had a love for the church. He served in the church, a love for people, and he just knew how to get us involved with things, uh, to know our interest, and to come alongside us. Good discipliner, teacher. So I would say that he just had all around qualities that you would expect from a father,
Mm.
and he did them well. He did
That's
them.
good. That's good. So, what do you think the number one thing that you use in your current, or as you were parenting your own kids? What would you say the thing that stood out to you most about your dad that you brought into your current family? or when they were younger, or even now?
Yeah. So leadership in the kind that leads with serving your children, but also it involves discipline. It involves teaching,
Hmm.
modeling it, and being consistent, admitting when you're wrong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when you're wrong, and that's one thing. Maybe this is a good time to talk about that. That
Yeah.
not many people know a proper apology, and
Right.
there are really three components to a proper apology. The first thing is the spirit that it's done in, and the second one is the word that is spoken, and then there needs to be a gesture attached to that.
Okay.
Young dad, I'd make mistakes, and out of either temper or out of anger. As a young dad, you got a lot of responsibility. You're trying to provide for the family, and you're making a career and paying
Yeah.
bills, all those things. And so I remember, as a matter of fact, I got this from one of Dr. Cole's book, and he
What's the
talked.
name of it? What's the name of the
Dr.
book?
Edwin Lewis Cole wrote a book, and in that book, it's called Maximize Manhood. And every guy should read that. I mean, every guy should read that.
Okay.
He talks about. Actually, let me take that back. This one's in his book, Communication, Sex, and Money, and that is in there about. It's called the chapter is called Word, Gesture, or Spirit, Word, and Gesture. And so here's how it would look like. When your kids, Elijah, I don't know what the age of your children are, but when they wrong each other, it's natural for a parent to say, "Go apologize to your brother. Go apologize to your sister," and they go, "I'm sorry." It's not done the right way.
Correct.
Because both people are wounded. One is offended and one has been the offender. And so what I had to learn was to get my spirit in check, whether it was with my children or with my wife, get my check. And then it's my responsibility to go. And if their spirit wasn't ready, I had to detect that. But if it was inclining toward being ready, then I could move it toward that. So here was an example. Let's say I said something or did something that offended one of my children. I would think about the situation. I would go over there and I would say, "Can I speak with you? Is this a good time to talk?" And of course, yes. They got their head down, their eyes closed, their pouty lips. I mean, they're really letting you know, you hurt me.
Yeah.
You call them and then they come and then they come to you with their eyes closed and their head down, And so you say, I want to talk to you. And would you look at me? So they lift up their head and their eyes are closed. They're really milking this. So you say, your
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah.
I want to say to you. So the spirit now, you can tell the spirit's ready in their spirit, and my spirit's ready to deliver the apology. And then you say what it was. I am sorry for this that I said or did to you. I know that you're hurt by that. And then you ask for forgiveness. Will you forgive me for what I did? And guess what the response was? Yes, always yes.
Right.
And then I would typically grab them on the shoulder or on the side as I'm talking to them in a
Okay.
manner. So I'm communicating this is serious and I really mean it.
Okay.
Right. So it's a way, again, you have to do it with spirit, word, and gesture. And it works for, really your family, even your spouse when you wrong them.
Really?
Yep.
That's cool. That's good to know because I knew younger that my mom didn't really apologize. My dad wasn't in my life. I mean, later she apologized as we got older. But I don't know where I learned that from, but I began to do that with my own kids. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, speaking of apologies, I told you earlier, before we got on, I wasn't feeling well today, and I ended up taking it out on my son. I have 4, 11, 9, 6, and 2, right? And Joshua is 9, and I was kind of bothered this morning because I wasn't feeling well, and I do the teaching, the math section in homeschooling, and it's the first thing in the morning, so already wasn't feeling well. He wasn't understanding the information, and I wanted to get to bed, right? And so because he wasn't understanding fast, I got frustrated. right? And I took it out on him.
Yeah.
Fast forward, about 7 o'clock today, I said, I was in the car with everybody, all the kids, and I said, Joshua, I want to apologize for how I acted this morning. It wasn't you, it was me. I was really kind of frustrated at, you know, me not teaching it to you correctly and you not understanding at a pace that I thought you should, maybe, but most of it was basically me just not feeling well. I said, will you forgive me? He said, yes, I forgive you.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
just saying, you just talked about it, but I actually had to live it out
Yeah.
today.
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
that's
good to
not to
model
brag
that
on
for
me,
our
but
children.
that's not to brag on me. That's just to say
Yeah.
that what you're saying is evidently the true in that regard.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. So you said you had 3 kids. What are the ages now?
So my son is 30 and he's married. We have a grandson from that, and our daughter, our second, is married also. She's been married 3 years
Okay.
and no children yet, and that's okay. Then our youngest is let's see now, she's 22,
Okay.
21 or 22. I always have to think about that. She's finishing up her undergrad this year.
Okay. So how did you decide on how to kind of raise them in the sense of, because they're all different, right?
Yeah.
I think that that some parents don't I mean, they recognize that they're different, but they don't necessarily parent them differently.
Right.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yes. So we can talk about like in noticing the differences in the children. So our son John,
Yeah.
he's very intelligent, and God has gifted him that way. And we've been through the uh, homeschool portion with them when they were younger, and then got him into a homeschool assistance, and then also in an academy. And then
Mhm.
at some point we realized, okay, they're kind of beyond our ability, especially so when he was going into middle school. It was like, this kid knows math like it's incredible.
Wow.
Hey, his his undergrad is in aerospace engineering,
This
and
is undergrad.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and he's really intelligent. I mean, he'll do things that we're talking about, and Dad, if you just do this and this, but something mechanical. I mean, it just comes to him naturally.
Yeah.
He's very intelligent, and so yeah, we had to parent him a different way. He's also a gifted musician. He was a drummer. He was on drumline, and um, we noticed also that he could be independent, and so we had to allow for that, to allow him
Okay.
to be a little more independent, but also uh, leading him in that way. So knowing how much freedom to give him and when not to give him so much freedom. Um,
Yeah. That's
yeah, it is tough. It's a learned thing for sure. Um, my wife and I are sports. We like to play sports. We're athletes. So we got him into sports early, and he's okay, but his passion was for music. And so when it was time to be in especially in high school, a percussionist, uh, we just supported him in that because that's really the bent he wanted to go in, and that really aligns with his mathematics skills.
it does.
Yeah, so we know that he's in that fashion, and that at some point we had to get him help that we couldn't help him with. I mean, he's really smart in that. Our middle daughter, she's very talented with people. She just can read people well. She's a servant. Matter of fact, she works in the medical profession as a child life specialist.
Okay.
She can operate in a sense of emergency. When there's an emergency, she goes into gear. She was a lifeguard at one of these local resorts, and somebody had an issue, and she was the first one on the scene and barking orders and getting
Oh,
things. I mean, as a matter of fact, she was on a mission trip to Tanzania with our church, and she helped deliver a baby. She just
what?
brings into action. He just has that ability about her.
How
So
old was she when she did that?
she was probably 21.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
recent.
Yeah, yeah, that was the middle child. Yeah, and then our youngest, she's all of them love the Lord, but she has a real love for serving through church, and she's involved in a singles group at church close to her campus, and she just has a real care for people and for animals, and she's even at some point all our children came to a place in life where they made a decision on what they wanted to do. So my son, he was pretty gifted in the musical realm in high school that he got a full ride to TCU for 4 years. And I'm thinking, yeah. And then before he signed, he said, Dad, I've been thinking, what am I going to do at the end of 4 years with a music degree?
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah. So you're going to save me money, right? Yeah. I said, well, have you thought that maybe you just go get a master's in something that would help you out? He says, no, I'm going to be an engineer, so I'm going to turn down that scholarship. So he made a decision of what
Wow.
he do, right? That's an adult decision there.
That is.
Yeah, our middle daughter was pursuing teaching, and so she did stuff in high school to prepare for that. And then sometime in college, about second year or third year, she decided, I know what I want to be, and it's not a teacher.
Mm.
Ally specialist. Okay, so how do we do that? So she figured it out. I can say that in her early years, in maybe in grade school, she didn't. She kind of struggled through school, and there were even times we were wondering, like, okay, is she gonna pass the tax test and the test? And she did. But when she came to that place as an adult to say, "Here's what I'm going to do," she was like top in her class.
Wow.
Selected for different practicums that there were like 300 people applying, and she was selected. She just had a way with people. She could make friends. But I'm saying that when she came to the place to make that decision, here's what really God's calling me to do, and she did it. Boy, things just changed. And our youngest, she ran track for 2 years at a college, and she studied to be a physical therapist. And then at some point, she said, I like running track, but it's not getting me what I'm going to do in my life.
Mm.
Transfer and not run track anymore. And she loves track. I mean,
that's big, man.
We spent Saturdays when she was a young girl at the TAAF track meets in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And she said one time, she said, hey, I'm not going to do it. So I look back and wonder, okay, how did they do that? Well, one of them was through prayer. My wife and I would pray for our children to do what God's calling them to do and to seek God. And then I think just modeling the idea of making decisions. If they don't really know how to do that, you model it. And then at some point, when they become to realize, here's what I'm going to do, then it's a good decision that they make.
Yeah.
So you got to have, I tell a lot of my clients, one of the best gifts you can give your children is to be healthy parents. If you're healthy, then you have healthy children.
That's good. You are telling, you're echoing what several other people have said, that, I just interviewed Tommy Turner last night, and he was talking about the same thing about, he wants to love his wife well, so that his kids can see that. Bernie said the same thing. I mean, you and Bernie, y'all worked together before about how important it is to love his wife, and that's probably the greatest gift that he can give his kids, you know. So that makes sense, because the value of family is a big deal,
It is. It is. It's
Absolutely.
God's training ground for moral values and how to operate in the world by teaching them biblical principles. So at a young age, my wife and I used to work. Are you familiar with the Awanas program?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So my wife and I were the recreation directors. But I can remember once we finished that, we would go into the groups, and our kids were young, and we would join in the Bible memorization. And then I remember when they'd come home, they're in the tub and we'd be there with them. We'd be saying the verse and they'd be repeating it back. It's a great
Yeah,
because they're learning it. I mean, they are learning scripture at a young age.
they are.
The things what we have to do with our children, because scripture is truth, and that truth is the guiding light.
Yeah,
When you as a father lead that. Now, some fathers say, that's really not my cup of tea, or I'm not really as good. Well, you may not be as good, but you need to be doing that.
you're right.
Giving you a
You can't
mate.
can't get better if you don't do it at all.
Yeah,
Right?
God is giving you a mate, a
Yeah,
help.
yeah.
The guy's married. That wife will help. God has given that wife certain qualities to help the guy in that regard. Yeah,
That is true because we each have our own, idiosyncrasies or our different
yep,
knacks about ourselves that help the kid find
hmm
their way, right? Because
yeah,
I'm more of
yeah,
I'm more an aggressive type person, and I can only imagine if that's all my kids got.
yeah,
Where
yeah,
my wife is a little more nurturing, of course, than I am. We're both disciplinarians, but I'm more of the disciplinarian.
yeah,
Uh, and I can only imagine, right? Like if the kid is only getting one side what it looks like to be a parent, I now can see how I struggled in my parenting until I start, reading the scripture, talking to people like yourself, of how it is that I can be a better dad.
yeah.
So
Hmm. Yeah.
you was talking about some books earlier. What are some of those books that you could recommend that was kind of helpful to people of
Yeah,
being a better dad?
yeah. One of the books is written by Steve Farrar. He's got 15 books out there, and I have all his books in my library. He used to do traveling seminars for guys, but he doesn't do that now. He actually leads the Bible study at Stonebar Church in Frisco, but he uh, he has a book called Point Man. It's how a man can lead a family. And that's a good book.
It's called Point Man.
Point Man, yeah.
Okay.
And then you can go to his website, Steve Farrar, Farrar, and look at the different books that he has there, and just grab one and start reading it. He's got one called Anchorman, how a man can anchor his family for the next 100 years. Think about that. A generation is typically 25 years.
Wow.
4 generations past me. I don't know. I didn't know my great grandfather on my father's side, but in a way, I kind of knew him because my dad talked about him.
Mm,
And look at that. That's his son, my father, and me, and my son. That's those generations there.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, so it's important we do that. It's
that
important,
makes a lot of sense.
guys.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What you said? I was
If a
just trying
guy,
to type down some of these books
yeah,
that you.
yeah. So that's one, and then "Maximize Manhood" by Edwin Lewis, Louis Cole. His series is called Majoring in Men. It's a curriculum for men, and there's a book and a workbook for each of those 9 books that make up that curriculum. Every guy should read those. And there's other authors out there.
People don't like to read though.
That's the thing I find, and so um, there's
Unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
it is very unfortunate. And it's the fountain of youth, though. You can learn anything by reading.
Hmm.
I learned to become a therapist by reading. I read a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, and that's really it's really not a good thing, especially for guys. Most guys they don't read. They say they don't read. Uh, it reminds me of this question I asked a guy. He was in his 30s. I said, "When was the last book you read?" He said, "High school." I said, "So here you are. You got the mind of a high school person."
Yes.
Back like I never thought of that. So yeah,
Absolutely. I didn't think reading was that big of a deal until I think it was like 2025 is when I started reading and studying the Bible, and then like my transition of wanting to, it's like this is what I've been missing, right?
mhm,
And then I said, okay. Then somebody taught me how to study the Bible. I was like, oh, okay, this is just like history. And then
yeah,
so I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm just interested in like autobiographies, things,
yeah,
books about people, which you can learn from people even if it's, I mean, you can learn from different books, but just for me, I like reading about how people came to the position that they are in.
Mhm.
That's why I like interviewing people like you, because you're a counselor in regards to families. But one of the big things that I want to have an impact on is men in the family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if I read up on that, if I talk to people that have read, then I'm learning as well, and I'm growing my mind, right?
Yeah.
As if you will.
Mhm.
So, what book do you feel like kind of are these books that you read after you became a counselor, or did you read any books before you became a counselor?
Oh no, I've been reading those books probably since, or some books since the mid '80s. That's
Okay.
I made that decision. Okay, I'm going to live for Christ now.
Okay.
Before then, I think people can come to a saving knowledge of Christ, but not make him Lord. And then someday you have to do that. Everybody has to do that.
Yeah.
Me, it was in the '80s. I put a stake in the ground. And so
Mm.
there, I started reading. And then probably in the early '90s, I think that's when I started getting to know about Steve Farrar, and would go to almost every one of his seminars that he had whenever he was in town. I'd like, I'm going to go and pick up a new book every time and just began to read a lot. So I've read on my formal training. I would read books on about men and marriage.
Mm. So is that so? Did the books kind of lead you towards counseling? Because you said you kind of dropped being
Yeah,
whatever you were doing to be a
yeah,
counselor. I literally remember that. I don't know where we were. Maybe I was in the deacon meeting or something with you. I can't remember, but I remember the conversation that you was letting it go to go pursue
yeah.
counseling. So what kind of
Well,
change happened?
yeah. So I would say that I've been reading before then, and then uh, my statement earlier is that God prepares us to where we're going to go. He was preparing me by reading all those books.
Okay.
So using it in my family, but also using what my dad, a lot of what my dad did was more caught than taught. And we are in a transition in our families where it needs to be taught, not just caught. Because think about this, Elijah, we're probably in our third to maybe fourth generation of divorced families. So where's the training going?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not unusual that my son's generation is divorcing. The divorce rate's about 50% right now
Correct.
for first time marriages. And in my generation, that's also there. So that's two generations. Then go back to my parents' generation. Well, you hear about it, but my grandparents, you didn't hear about that much. As a matter of fact, if somebody was divorced, that was a stigma. I mean, people didn't associate with them.
Oh
So
wow.
here we are in our third or fourth generation of single families or blended families or disrupted families, this whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Where's the training that's happening? Where's the healthy training? It's not. So, as to answer your question, I'm thinking that God had gave me an interest in that to read, to be able to impart that knowledge into people that He sent
Mm.
my way.
That's good. That's good to know, because like some people just get into something because they like it, as
Yeah,
opposed to what you're saying is that God kind of led you in the direction of wanting to see healthy families.
yeah.
And so, what would you say as it relates to being a father or a dad? Uh, that was your what was the biggest mistake you learned from, or that taught you most about being, being becoming or being a dad? Do you remember any mistake that you may have made that helped you later? I guess.
Well, um, there's some things that come to mind. One is in my anger, the Bible says, do not sin. So in my anger, do not discipline, take it out on your children.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When that realization came to me, like, oh, wow. Uh, I need to,
Yeah.
I need to really make a change on that.
That
Yeah.
sounds familiar.
Another thing is how I treat and speak to my wife is so critical,
Yeah. Okay.
so critical. And so if I have a disagreement with her about something, especially relating to the kids or any other matter, how I react is an example to my children.
Mm,
And so
that's
uh, I wish I could say I always got it right, but that's not the case. I had to learn when I was younger. And so learning that is important for guys to do that. And where is it modeled? Well, it should be modeled in the home.
yeah.
It should be modeled in the home and talked about in the home. And
Mm,
we don't have that. People want to belong to something, so they find some other place to go and belong and learn whatever ways there are there.
that is true. That is true. I think one of the mistakes I had as a young father, um, I mean, I'm not old father, but my oldest is 11. And one of the things that I did that I remember based on what you're saying and how they listen to what is going on in the room,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're dialoguing. Me and my wife we're talking about something, and we get into a heated discussion, and this is what my kids are hearing.
Yeah,
And then and so we're literally modeling how to communicate, and it's a
yeah,
negative way sometimes. But I'm just thinking about this particular time where then my kids they go and dialogue to each other the same way that me and my wife just dialogue,
yeah,
but then we get upset as parents and say, "Why are you talking to your brother, your
mm-hmm.
sister like that?" So
Yeah,
that's so major of a point that you're making. That the way that I love my wife and specifically in communication with her in front
mm-hmm.
of my kids allows them to see what it looks like to communicate with your spouse. But at the same time, I think that it'll also transfer over into how they communicate with people.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
So have your kids come back and talk to you about things that they've learned from being in the house?
In some respects, let me say this. One thing that I didn't like to hear as I got older was, "Well, Dad did it, or Dad does it." Uh,
Okay.
that got my attention quick.
Okay.
So, to your question, yeah, especially my son, he'll come and we'll have good discussions about uh, life, about business, and I remember one of the things that we have in common, and there are many things, but we love to go fish and hunt together. And I remember we were out. I had bought this used camper, and we were out underneath the stars. And then by being with him with time and having quantity time, it allowed for the quality time. And I remember he's looking up at the stars. He says, "Dad, what do you think God thinks about all this?" I mean, there's these questions that come out, and those are the conversations you want to get right. They're hard to orchestrate, and so you
Yeah.
have to be there. And so as he has come back, and we're talking about now that he has a son, and we talk about, hey, what are you guys doing about raising my grandson in a spiritual manner, right? What are you doing
Yeah.
about Jesus?
Yeah.
And, uh, and then he says, well, we're doing this and doing this. So it's good to have those conversations about that. And obviously, he has a lot of conversations about dealing with people in business and being ethical. So we talked
Mm,
about that and how there's so many temptations to not be ethical and
it is.
not be ethical. Now, since he's a very intelligent guy, I remember in college one time he said, Dad, I can see why it's hard for a scientist to believe in God,
Mm,
especially those really
really?
smart guys. Yeah.
Okay.
I said, well, what about you? So we'd have discussions about that. He says, no, I'm solid. I'm solid in God. And I can
Wow.
actually see God in science. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I said, well, that's right.
Wow.
That's how God intended us to see him through his creation.
Mm, that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
to have a conversation with your dad, man, on spiritual things, it leads back to Deuteronomy 4, like you know what I'm saying, and being able to dialogue with your kids on, and then they come back and say, okay, this is what I learned from my dad, and now
Mhm.
I'm implementing it into my own kids.
Yeah.
So as a granddad, like, do you get, so how old is your grandkid?
He's 15 months old, so he's just
Oh, so
starting
you
out.
haven't, okay. So you're just starting out. So have you envisioned what kind of conversations that you might
Yeah.
have with him?
Yeah, definitely have. And when we discover new say critters out there, we'll say, look what God created, that kind of thing. Or maybe there's a lizard that has all this coloration, or a butterfly. Isn't that amazing how God has put all this color in that
Wow.
creature, to have those conversations with that, right? And then to model that love, and then talk about God's love for him through
Mm,
Christ. Yeah, absolutely.
that's
I'm
good.
looking forward to that.
That's
And one
good
thing I
because
remember about my grandfather, my father's father, um, he when he was older in life, he was a farmer, and I'd spent a lot of time on the farm with him. I remember coming to see him in his room. He would be in his bed with the Bible by his side and the baseball
mm,
on.
with a what?
The baseball game on the radio. He would hear the baseball game in the
That's cool.
summers. Yeah, yeah. And then
That's
I
cool.
remember my dad had his Bible by the side of his bed too. I mean, he had it there, and yeah. So those guys were Bible readers, as I am too. We got to be
Oh
Bible readers.
wow.
Yeah. And it really
That's
wasn't
cool.
something that was told to us. It was just modeled. You have to see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's a good point. You know, I don't think my kids, what I had asked them, I don't think they see me reading the Bible because I wake up a lot earlier than them, and I read the Bible before I get to them. However, what I wanted to do to make sure that they know that I'm in the scriptures is that we do Bible study every morning, right? And so in those Bible discussions, we've been able to kind of unpack the scriptures together, which is really
Hmm.
cool. And they
Yeah.
have asked some really intriguing questions that I was like, I don't know. We got to figure this. I got to look at it
Yeah.
together.
That's right. Yeah.
But it even came to the point of like my son. Well, my son who's 6. This past Sunday, he asked he asked the question of why did his grandpa have to die?
Mm.
And so that's a 6-year-old asking that type of question. And I'm thankful that Chris was there to kind of shepherd him through that. And
Yeah.
so then when he gets home, we get the dialogue about it too. And I didn't get the dialogue about it this past Sunday because it was so busy.
Yeah.
But they just reflecting that I need to go back and talk to him about that. Because I never even knew he had that question.
Yeah.
And his grandfather, my mom's husband passed away like I want to say like 3 or 4 months ago or something like that. But
Hmm.
that's the type of thought process is happening
Yeah.
with even at that age. That's why you're saying like at 15 months, you should be having those conversations.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
shouldn't wait or allow the church to be the place that they learn about Christ
Yeah.
or about the makeup of the world around them. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. So your grandfather, you said he is still around?
No, no, he's passed. As a
Okay.
matter of fact, when my dad passed away, all my previous generations are gone now. The mother,
Okay.
father, and all aunts, uncles, they're all gone. Actually, I have one aunt that's still living, but all blood relatives in previous generations are gone. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how would you talk to like a dad that is about to be a first time dad and has not had the type of I guess nourishment that you've had as raised by to have encounters with your granddad and your dad, and through your dad you was able to have an encounter with his granddad. So an
Yeah.
individual that's missing that, how would you communicate to them how they should, be prepared to be a dad? Does that
Yeah.
make sense of the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, definitely Deuteronomy 6 is a good hallmark for guys. It talks about Uh, one of the greatest verses there is to love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and mind. The Lord our God is one, right? And then through
Yeah.
there it says, "Hey, talk about God through your waking, through your day, through your evening, you're coming in, you go all that stuff. So that's something that a guy should read is Deuteronomy 6. Definitely be reading the Proverbs one a day. Should be in that.
That's
And
good.
then find a mentor, somebody who's willing to spend the time, an older person who has had some good training and that's willing to spend time and be open with that person. And then with today resources, be a reader. If you're not a reader, well, learn to be a reader.
Yes.
You need to be a reader. And today there's so many podcasts. Like, I don't know if you use Right Now Media. Right Now Media has a good section in there for men. So there's a lot of good things to learn. So there's almost no excuse for a guy to not be able to learn things. And Dr. Cole has a statement that he says, you cannot give that which you do not possess. So if you don't have it, you can't give it, but you can get it. That's the thing, is you can get it.
Right.
Yeah, you can go get it. And so God has made it available to us. So they got to be in the Word for sure. Got to be in the Word.
Yeah, because that's the number one thing I would say that helped me transition to being, even besides the fact that, I wasn't raised by my dad, and I know how that felt. Me not having that connection what helped me become like really want to know how to kind of steward my kids was the scriptures.
Yeah.
Like there was not a book that caught my attention. I'm sure there are books out there that may work from a practical standpoint, possibly, right. But when it comes back to it, it's going to have biblical concepts.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of what these two guys have, both Cole and Farrar, right? From a biblical, not even concept. They use the Word of God in there. They have Scripture, and then they talk about that. Yeah, based on Scripture. Yeah, that's what it's got to be.
Yeah. So how have you seen? When did you give your life to Christ? Like, when was the transition? You said younger. You was younger.
Yeah.
But like, when did you become serious? You said 80s or something.
When did you become serious about it? When I was in high school, I made a profession of faith.
Okay.
But I wasn't discipled, and so part of that's on me.
Okay.
Let's say the church, right? And then in the 80s, after I was married, around the time I was getting married, that's when I made a decision. So I was mid-20s.
Okay.
Decision. You know what? I quit. I got one foot in and one foot out, and I'm a hypocrite. I could see it. I'm a hypocrite. Yeah. I'm not true to myself. I'm a phony, and I didn't like that. So I made the decision. Okay, it's time to move forward. And when you make that decision, you've got God's attention. He'll put people in your life, and you just got to recognize it and go with it and begin to be a reader of the Word. Because then understanding the Word comes different. Then you have, that you're now acting you're learning through the Spirit, right, and not your flesh. And so
your intentions change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important for every guy to come to that place in his life to make that decision and say, today's the day I'm going to do this. And I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to jump in.
That's good, because that makes sense. That makes sense. So because you're talking about like your mid-20s, that's when it happened for me. My mid-20s, when I was like, man, I'm being a hypocrite. Like, I literally woke up one particular summer day, and I was like, man, like I don't feel good about nothing that I did these past years. I gotta do. This is not okay. I remember that, and from that point forward, looking for God in the scriptures and what I needed to do to live my life, literally things start to change. Not saying that it was perfect, but I began to be more intentional. But at the same time, I was also convicted about, when I wanted to go do something, and after I did whatever it is that I did. So that makes sense, man. It's crazy that it always comes back to the scripture, no matter who I talk to.
Yeah. And James says would have called me a double-minded man. That's what James would have said. Oh, you're a double-minded man, unstable in all your ways, dude.
That is true.
Sure, James. Guilty as charged.
That was me. So we almost finished. Let me ask you this: what do you enjoy the most, or did you enjoy the most? Well, you're still a dad, so what do you enjoy the most about being a father?
Really, when I see that my children are truly pursuing Christ and the fruit shows, right? So that's more like on the spiritual side, but overall, that gives me the most joy. But
Mhm.
really, when all our kids come over and they want to come over, so when my dad passed away in January, my kids were busy. My daughter, my youngest, was in college. She just started that semester. My daughter, my middle daughter, she was working and obviously married. And then my son, he's busy and married, and uh, they've got a young child. And then my dad was about 10 hours south of me, so I would talk pretty constantly with my sister to give me updates what was going on, and knew that he went into hospice and then was going to die any time. So she called me and said, "Hey, Dad passed away." So
Mm.
immediately I got a hold of my children. I said, "Look, I know you guys are busy, and here's when your mom and I are going down there, and you're welcome to ride with us." And then, well, Dad, I don't know if I can get off, and all these texts came through. Fine, okay. Well, come time to go, they were all there, and they, drove like late at night or whatever to get there, even just to be there a few hours.
Wow.
And it gives you a real joy to know that all the time you invested to create a family environment, to get them to know their grandparents. To me, that's huge because I knew both sets of my grandparents when they were
Wow.
living.
What a blessing.
Yeah, and we worked hard because my folks were 10 hours south of me, and my wife's folks are just 30 minutes. So we would spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah.
But whenever I had my vacation for the time I was working, well, we were down there visiting family for the whole time. So they got to know their grandparents, and so it
Mm.
wasn't hard for them to say, "Hey, we're going to get off and we're going there. We're all
Yeah.
going." So now when we have family get-togethers, they're all here. I mean, all my kids, and now that the family's growing with grandchildren, that's really a great joy to know that there's a love for each other, even if they have disagreements on things. There's a love for each other, and they will stick up for each other. My middle daughter, before she had gotten married, I remember she sent me a text of her battery had died, and somehow she'd gotten a hold of my son, and my son actually beat me out there to help replace the battery. I'm like, "What are you doing here?" "Well, I'm here to
Wow.
help." I said, "Well, I got that." "Well, I know, but I want." So
That's
he would do
awesome.
anything for his sisters, I guarantee it, or for his mother. And so just knowing that they love each other in that way, they might bicker over things. When it
Right.
comes to helping each other, they're going to be there.
That's awesome, man. Like that's what I'm preparing myself to try to do. Me and my wife, we was at some particular conference, and it talked about how you are uh, literally helping the next marriage, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
how you steward your children, you're impacting their marriage right now. And
yeah.
I was like, man, that's huge, man. So what you just said is literally what I'm trying to do, and you've
Awesome.
already given practical ways of doing that, and so I
Yeah,
appreciate that. So we're gonna
yeah.
go into the questions when you finish your thought. Go ahead.
I would encourage you to continue to do that. Let me just encourage you, and I can see in the time that I've spent with you that you and your wife are doing that. So let me just exhort you to continue that march. Let me say this: that I use this a lot in my counseling when I see couples and they're having issues. So I
Okay.
think about their family of origin, and I see that they're very much dysfunctional. I tell them this: my wife and I, we grew up in different parts of Texas, 10 hours away, 500 miles away. But I am convinced that if you took me out of my family at a young age and put me in her family and put her in my family, we would come out as the same people because our families, our parents had the same values. Both uh, the fathers worked for the most part as the primary breadwinner, and then the mothers did some work. They were heavily involved in the church, heavily involved in the lives of the kids. And I said, even with that, with the similarities we have, we still have our challenges in marriage.
All right.
We still do, but it's that legacy that you want to build, so that your children know that, hey, marriage is a lifelong commitment. It's a covenant. It's a covenant, and that ordained by God, and with God's help, you'll make it through. You'll make it.
Absolutely. That's
So
what's up. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So we come to our part of the section of the interview where we do a couple of, interesting, fun questions. You have to give me a number 1 through 44, and then I'll read the question, and then you answer it in the best way you know how. Ready?
21.
21. Okay. 21. Who was your childhood hero?
Oh my gosh, childhood hero. Depends what age. So at a very young age, I would definitely say it was my grandfather.
Okay.
At a very young
Why-
age. He
why say that?
he was a farmer, and I think, well, today if I could farm and make a living, I'd be a farmer too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I'd be an old guy. That's hard work.
It is a
I love being out there on the farm with him in the dirt, either plowing or disking or planting or watering or just sitting and just watching it grow. Oh gosh, those were the best times in my life. So I would say my grandfather. Yeah.
okay. That's cool. That's what's up. One. Okay, give me another number 1 through 44.
About 14.
Did you have pets growing up? And if you did, tell me about them.
Pets, yeah, we had dogs. We had dogs, and our dogs were outdoor dogs. And we just had a blast playing. We had a poodle. Initially, we had a poodle, and she was a pretty tall poodle, and a blast playing with them.
You said had a blast playing with them?
Yeah, playing with them. And what's interesting is that when my wife and I got married, she grew up with pets, but the dogs were indoor dogs. So that was an adjustment period for me to go through and for her to go through. Yeah. Something to
say. How did y'all settle on that?
Yeah. Something.
How did y'all settle on which dog? Did y'all get one that was inside, one that was outside? Like,
well, we, the wife always wins on that, Elijah. You know that?
I do. Very good point. Very good point.
Whatever you want, dear.
Very good point. That's funny. All right, give me another number.
Okay. How about 33?
Okay. What's the best gift you've ever received? What's the best gift you've ever given?
Best gift I've ever received. Wow. I think back, and I had a really good childhood. So I think back to when I received, back then we called them spider bikes, the banana seat with handlebars on them, and just riding that thing all day on Christmas Day. Oh man, that was the best thing.
That's what's up.
I think in giving a gift, I would say my wife and I had been married 20 years, and when we got married, I didn't have a lot of money, so unfortunately, I didn't get her the best rock. And so at that point, I was able to invest in a much better rock for her finger. So I would say that was for her. Yeah,
that's good. That may be the best thing because I went into debt getting my wife her rock. So, I mean, I came out of. I mean, I was eventually able to pay for it, but I think I would have much preferred to have it up front and to pay for it. So you didn't probably lose out on that.
And those are the material things. So let me talk about an immaterial gift that I think is when my wife and I got married, and our parents have never been much into debt. They have a house and maybe a car payment, but I remember her family and my family, because of conversations we've had, is like, yeah, we didn't buy anything if we didn't have the money to buy it. You just didn't buy it.
Yeah.
we have had that strategy with our children. So in educating our children, we would not allow them to have any school debt. So my
Mm.
graduated without school debt. My middle daughter
So,
graduated without school debt. And my son came to me one day and said, you know, Dad, all my friends, we want to go, you know, we're married and they're married and we want to go celebrate this, but they can't go because they have school loans. And I said, that's why we never
wow,
wanted you to go into debt. We didn't
wow,
want you to. We just, you went to the school that we could afford. You had to pay for some of it too. And
yeah,
look at you now. You don't have any debt. And
that's
that,
amazing.
so that would say would be the immaterial, somewhat immaterial gift. It's that idea of live within your means. Best.
Absolutely. That's good. That's good. We take the same approach now because my parents, my mom didn't know any better as
Yeah.
far as that relation as it relates to having school debt, and so me and Jen have made the decision. We let our kids know that if you want to go to college, then you're going to have to figure out how to pay for it without loans. But we're willing to invest in like a business or or something of that nature, or a house, down payment for a house. That's what we have funneled to or discussed about doing, and our kids, we've explained it to them why.
Mhm.
So one of the things, like for Gianna, she wants to be a zoologist,
Mm.
and so and she's been wanting to be that since she was 5. Like she has not wavered from that. And so about 2 years ago, Jen kind of sat her down and talked to her about like what are the descriptions of what she would need in order to be a zoologist, and what college she would need, and how much college would cost,
Mhm.
and see if that was something still interesting to her. Well, she paused for a moment, and she said, "No, I think I may reconsider." Right.
Mm.
But then it came back a couple months later, and she was like, "That's really what I want to do, is to be a zoologist. So I'm
Yeah.
just gonna have to figure out how to get college without going into debt." Right.
Yeah.
So fast forward to when we in October, she plays softball. And the previous year she wasn't that good. This year she's a pretty solid player. And I told her, I said, uh, have you had a kid that didn't recognize their own talent,
Yeah.
right? And I told her, I said, you're pretty good, and the coaches are saying you're pretty good too. I said, I wouldn't tell you that because I want you to be, I want to be honest with my kids about their talent so that they can practice to the point of where they want to get to.
Yeah.
So I told her that, if you do good, then you can get a scholarship. Well, I think 3 weeks ago, she was like, I was having a conversation about, do you like softball? Because we made her do softball because we wanted her to be a part of some type of sports activity.
Right.
Because you already know what sports does. It teaches you a lot about everything, right?
Hmm.
And so she went into the season last year not liking it, and like 3 games into this season not liking it, and just doing it because mom and dad said so. Well, 3 weeks ago, she said, I like softball. I said, why? I said, when did that happen? She said, because I see that I'm pretty good at it, and I can also get a scholarship for it.
There you go. There you
And
go.
so and so now she's 11, and she's already thinking about how she's
Mm.
going to pay for her schooling, because her mind is, I want to be a
Yeah.
zoologist.
Yeah.
So I'm just going back to, that's a long story, but just going back to kind of like what you're saying, teaching them early about, stewarding your money. And then as far as like on the back end, not having college debt. Like if I
Right.
didn't have college debt, like I would be probably I'd be wealthy right now.
Hmm.
Because of my student debt, it has been an anchor for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And so I tell them like how much debt I have.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so that they can know, like, this is what daddy did, and I don't want you to be there. So
Right.
yeah, so I
Awesome.
appreciate you. I got one last question, and that
Okay.
question is, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want your kids to remember you?
Yeah. If I could just have them view me like I view my dad. Now they don't know what that is, images in me, right? So I have to kind of
Okay.
connect to them. So part of that would be they have a loving father, one who showed them the way to Christ, that mom and dad showed them the way to Christ, that I loved my wife and loved her genuinely and treated her as I'm supposed to, and that they should take what they learned, the good things that they learned from it, and then even take the bad things they learned from us and make better.
Mm.
They can take that, and I think if they walk away with that, number one, knowing Christ, knowing how to treat a spouse and relate with family and be with family, I think that would be something that would be a good legacy to leave behind.
That's good. I really appreciate that. Well, that concludes this interview with Mr. AJ. I want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out to talk with me and talk to the people that will be listening to this about how to be a better dad. You gave us some very good tips. You even gave us insight on how you were raised. So, I really appreciate that. Is there anything you'd like to say before we head out?
Well, I would say thank you for letting me be part of this. I think this is a great thing that you're being called to do and that you're seeing it through. And that guys who, I would say that guys who didn't have the upbringing I did, be the guy who starts that. Be the first part of that link in the anchor. You're the one that grounds the family going forward, right? So whatever many generations, a guy can affect for sure 2 generations and maybe a third one, and if he's lucky, a fourth one while he's alive. But for sure, it's easy to like I can see back 4 generations. So a guy can make an impact on 4 generations. So be the guy to do that. Be the guy to do that. Even if you don't know how, learn how to do that. That's what I would say.
That's good. That's a good word to leave on. I really appreciate you, AJ.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Probably see you on the call tomorrow, maybe not, depending on everybody's schedule, as you know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate you, sir.
Well, thank you so much for asking me.
Absolutely. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.